Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident, confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.
Hello and welcome to the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and your confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about how a fear of failure might be wrecking your confidence. And I got a bit of a cold today, but I'm going away for 2 weeks, so the show must go on. The podcast must be recorded. So let's be honest, around failure, none of us really want to fail. Well, I work on the assumption, on the basis that nobody really wants to fail, especially if you are a professional, if you are my kind of person. You don't want to fail and you wouldn't necessarily choose to fail or to have a failure. And there's a lot of chat, isn't there, about failure and how failure is a gift and like failure is like on the way to success and all of these things. And you can hear as I'm saying them. And I think you're probably the same as me in that I think these quotes feel pretty cheesy, pretty annoying. And especially if you really fear failure, they feel really just irrelevant and irritating. And I have never actually recorded a specific podcast around fear of failure. And I thought about why that would be because it lurks under so many of the conversations that I have. It lurks under so much of the coaching that I do with my clients around feeling confident at work. But I think I haven't recorded it because I have also had this fear and I didn't think I'd worked through it sufficiently enough to be able to speak about it with some integrity and with some authority. And now here I am. So something has changed for me. So maybe something could change for you too. But I doubt it's going to be via you having an epiphany and realizing that failure is just everything on the way to success and like all of those things that they say. And you're like, oh my God, please don't tell me that's so annoying. I definitely don't want to fail. And let's be right, we have been conditioned not to fail. If you have grown up in the kind of school system I have, failure is not what we're going for, right? You're aiming to pass, not fail. If you're taking the driving test, you're aiming to pass, not fail. You're aiming to get it right and prove to people that you can do it by these standard objective tests that everybody sets for you that tells you whether or not it's a pass or a fail. And if you're one of my people, you've probably managed to avoid failure pretty well. Most of my people, successful professionals, have avoided failure. Now, it's not to say you've avoided it completely. You probably haven't. There probably is a job that you didn't get or a project that didn't come off or something like that. But generally, things have probably gone pretty well for you. You know, you've been successful. You've managed to come through the school system, come through the university system or something similar, pass exams on your way to the life that you have now. And I do think that that's important because culturally, professionally, we're rewarded for avoiding failure and for passing instead of failing. So I think it kind of gets inbuilt and ingrained. So even though I don't think that most of you have experienced loads of failure, but even so, the fear of failure still hovers. It's like a spectre, a kind of low grade, constant background presence that when you fear it, creates panic, pressure, a sense of like looming risk, even when nothing has gone wrong yet. And this might not be something that you have kind of tapped into logically, but that doesn't mean that it isn't there. And it also doesn't mean that it isn't having an impact. So, like I said at the beginning, many of my clients find that some kind of fear of failure is laying beneath the stuff that's happening for them at work. Not because of something that has happened, but because of what might happen. The spectre of failure kind of hovers over day to day. And you might notice it more in things that feel more out of your comfort zone, more exposing, more people are going to see you. Maybe you've just stepped up, and that fear of failure kind of can come to the fore. Or if it's lurking in the background for you, the thing that might be happening day to day is some kind of avoidance. So that fear of failure can trigger all kinds of like protective strategies. So it might be over preparing to death, overthinking everything to the nth degree, trying to please everyone around you all the time. It might be really over perfecting everything, keeping your standards up way high when it's not even possible. It might be around hesitating to speak up, or it might be like obsessing about what you should have said or how you said it or how it landed. And we talk about these things on the podcast a lot, right? But the thing that they can often have in common, not always, but can often have in common, is they are some kind of like avoidance type behavior to avoid what? Failure. To avoid getting it wrong, to avoid messing up, which can equate in our minds to failure. And the thing that I've noticed is that sometimes we don't really see a difference between I have had a failure and I am a failure. Those two things can be completely conflated in your mind. I actually think that they were in mine, and I've noticed it many times with clients. So, of course, you're probably going to try and avoid failure by over prepping, overthinking, people pleasing, making sure everything's perfect, hesitating around, do I speak up? Do I say this? Etc. etc. If a failure means I am a failure, not I have had a failure, I am a failure, of course, you probably want to try and avoid that, because who wants to be a failure? Right? With it comes lots of negative emotion, awful ideas about ourselves and our worthiness and our place in the world. If we fail, we are a failure. And even if it doesn't go that far for you, failure can still be pretty tough in terms of the emotions that it can bring up. So it's no wonder that these kinds of behaviors that we talked about, like over prepping, overthinking, people pleasing, hesitating, can just look like us being professional, right? But they can be kind of elaborate avoidance mechanisms. And I don't want to kind of get into psychoanalysis here. This is not all we do on the podcast, but they are almost your solution that you have put in place to avoid a problem. And that problem is the potential for failure. So, what might it cost you if you put that solution in place, that sort of avoidance type solution to this problem of potential failure? What might it have cost you? Well, your energy, because overdoing, overthinking, overchecking, overprepping, seeing risk everywhere, very energy sapping, very energy draining. Heaviness, right? Things can feel very serious, very difficult day to day. It might have led to, an extreme end. It might lead to something like burnout, where people just have got, no energy left, physically as well as mentally. It might lead to missing out on opportunities. You might be one of those people that really does feel the fear and do it anyway. A lot of my clients are, but it might have led to you playing a bit smaller than you might like to. Maybe there's stuff that you've missed out on because you couldn't risk a failure. Maybe it stopped you putting yourself forward for things. Maybe it's just kept you quiet when actually you did have something to say. You might just think this is just the way of operating. This is how the world works. This is what you have to do. And if some of my clients are honest, their entire career is actually kind of built on it. Everything that they do day to day is built on or around avoiding the potential for failure. And you can imagine, if everything you're doing is built on you trying to avoid failure, that has an impact on how you show up. I'm not saying that it hasn't worked for you. It may have worked for you very well. You may be very successful, but there is a price to pay, even though it's worked. And often that is why a client will end up at my door, because despite the fact that it's worked so far, It may not be working anymore. They may have got to a level where it is too exhausting. They may have got to a position where it is too exposing. They may have got to a job where there's suddenly all these out of comfort zone things they've got to do and they cannot avoid the potential for failure. And that is messing them up. It's messing with their system, it's messing with their mind, and it is definitely messing with their confidence. So I want you to think about this. Are some of the behaviors that you're engaged in at work, if they are over prepping, overdoing, overthinking, perfectionism, second guessing, if you look underneath those, are they your solution to definitely not failing? Good to know. Good to ask yourself that question. And one of the angles that I want to talk about when I'm thinking about failure with you guys is I think there is a bit of a disconnect between professionals versus entrepreneurs, and why the messaging around failure kind of misses the mark for you guys. Because we hear things like fail fast, don't we? Failure is growth, failure is on the way to success. Get out there and fail. And that, I think, having thought about this on your behalf, those messages often come from the entrepreneurial world, the business world. And whilst in entrepreneurship, that probably is more true, right? You've got to fail because there is no charted path for you to succeed. You've got to take loads of action. It's got to be a mess. You're going to do loads of things that are failures before something hits. Is generally the way business goes, right? Entrepreneurs accept that and they understand that it might not be pretty, but that's kind of the way it is. But in your world, if you work in corporate, legal, public sector, insurance, finance, or other professional settings, failure is not seen as the way to do things. It's seen as a risk. And you know that failure could impact your reputation, it could impact your relationships, it could impact your progression. You've been trained to be reliable, to be thorough, to be right. So when someone shows up or you see some nice little, tidbit online that's like, failure is a good thing, you're like, I mean, no, it clearly isn't, is it? It can feel completely out of step with your environment and even could sound quite reckless. Fail fast, fail forward. You're like, probably not because I could get sued and my clients are paying me to get things right, or there might be a heavy cost to my failure. So that fear of failure isn't, silly or weak. It makes sense and it's deeply embedded not only through your childhood probably and your conditioning, but potentially also for if you're a professional in your environment. Failure is not necessarily appreciated. I've talked about this many times on the podcast, but I made a mistake when I was a junior lawyer, and that mistake could have cost my firm quite a bit of money. They're not like, fail fast, Anna. They're like, please try and avoid insurance claims, Anna. And you might feel the same. Failure is on the way to success. You might be like, no, failure means an insurance claim. My professional reputation is in tatters, right? So we can see why you may have put in place all kinds of solutions to avoid failure, over prepping, over checking, having extremely high standards, seeing risk everywhere, always making sure don't do this unless it's 100% right. Don't say this unless it's 100% right. It makes sense. And the kind of epiphany that the world has had around failure and how sometimes it's a good thing may really feel like it does not apply to you as a professional. But something to consider, a couple of things to consider actually, that I have noticed when I'm coaching clients is that we can often, because of this training, because of this conditioning, because of our background, and because of our professional environment, we can get the failure thing slightly skewed. So we may not be going all the way to fail fast and fail forward and all of that. We may just be like, I'm a professional, it's not appropriate and I'm never going there. However, that is one end of the spectrum. And you may be on the other end of the spectrum where you're equating one failure with disaster, one mess up with career suicide, one wrong move with sacking, can't get another job, end up as a bag lady on the street. That's from my own mental back catalogue, that one for you. So I want you to think about this. Yes, it may not be appropriate for us as professionals to go all the way to let's fail all the time on the way to success. But it also might not be appropriate for us to assume that one failure means that we're in the crap at our jobs, never going to succeed, everyone's going to hate us, and our reputation is going to be ruined bucket. But that might inadvertently be the bucket that you're in. So here's something to consider. You probably are surrounded by people, even in your successful professional environment, who have failed. And you might not know it. You might know it. So it's worth calling this up to your mind, or it's even worth having a conversation with a few people, because the thing is that many of your peers and colleagues, and even the people above you who are successful professionals, have failed. They have made bad calls. They have missed a deadline. They have annoyed a client. They have had a very awkward conversation with someone that didn't go well. They have had an insurance claim even, and they're still in their jobs. Just notice that. They're still in their jobs. They're still moving through their career. They're still successful. Have you noticed that now I'm saying it? Do you know even a professional who you know has had a failure, who you respect, who you count as successful, who you trust, who you know is good at their job? Because if you do, it can't be true that a failure equals crap at my job, ruined reputation, ruined career, in the don't ever ask about them again bucket. Now, it may be true that there are some professionals that have had such a monumental failure that it really is career ending. But I would suggest they are probably for things like inappropriate sexual conduct, stealing from their employer, stuff like that. It's not like I come to work, I do a good job, I try and do the best that I can, and I've had a failure. You may be able to find examples of this being career ending, but I generally don't think that it is. And if you don't know anyone, if you're like, I don't think anyone around me who is successful has ever failed, could you ask around? Could you say, put it out on your like Yammer or your chat or whatever you have at work and be like, look, in my head, I'm equating one failure with absolute career suicide and the end of days, end of times. Has anybody failed and still succeeded in their career overall? And I bet you that people will come back and tell you yes. And the reason that that might be useful is because you might have unknowingly hitched up the idea of one failure and overall failure in your career. A lot of people have. And once we manage to see that, we know that, and we unhook them, the fear of an individual failure lessens. It loosens its grip. It weakens when you know that despite the fact that you probably aren't going to aim for failure like an entrepreneur might, or you're not going to particularly enjoy having a failure, you can still have one and be successful in your career. And when you can hook those two ideas together, you can reduce the impact on your day to day. And that is to say, those solutions that you have put in place that we talked about at the top of the episode to avoid this one failure that you think is going to land you in the dumps for life. Overchecking, over-preparing, not saying anything, making sure everything's 100% right before you ever give it a go. Once you have unhooked one failure from career suicide, those behaviors don't have to exist anymore. Yes, you will take the appropriate amount of attention and care with your work to make it right and to avoid messing up, but you're going to do that anyway. That is not the same, you will find out to your delight, as everything being driven by trying to avoid a failure. And the other thing is, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, it brings failure into the light. We used to have this thing in our team called Fuck Up Friday. And somebody would say, FYI, everyone, I made this mistake. And they would also say, here's what I did, or here's how I fixed it. And it was amazing because I could see that team members at first didn't want to do it. And so I went first, and I used to do Fuck Up Friday. And I think I only did it twice before one other brave soul, Amy, I can still remember it, took the time and the energy to email and said, this was like failed massively. And here is what I did to fix it. And you know what? Nobody else in our team made that mistake because Amy had owned it. She was like, okay, I can tell people about my failure. Anna's doing it. Did people lose all respect for me? I don't think they did. Did I lose all respect for me? No. Sometimes we hold ourselves to the most impossible standards while we just assume that everyone else is just breezing through on a sea of success. But it's probably not the case, is it? But one thing I do want to say is that sometimes knowing this is not enough. So you might know logically that one mistake doesn't equal, or one failure doesn't equal a complete failure. And you might also know that having a failure doesn't equate to being a failure. So you might know and say, well, I know I can have a failure, but I know I'm not a failure as a person. I'm okay with that. However, knowing this logically isn't always enough. You can still be gripped by fear of failure, failure avoidance, and all of those behaviors can come through. Our emotional selves, the emotional learnings that we take in, don't necessarily equate with logic. You can hold logic in one part of your brain, and you may hold some kind of emotional learning about why it is definitely necessary for you to completely do everything in your power to avoid failure in another. And when those two bits are held separately, they never see the light of day together. You can know both of them, but in order to actually feel safer and to know and to let go of some of those protective behaviors which are now causing a problem, the overworking, the silence, the perfectionism, it takes more than just knowing. Sometimes you may have heard something on this podcast that just goes bing and your brain's connecting it all up for you. But it may take more than knowledge and knowing. It may take support, work. And if you want to come and do that work with me, you are very welcome to book a call. There is a link in the show notes. Come and explore private coaching, where we will see and really understand where those solutions you've put in place, those avoidance strategies might be showing up and why. And we're not going to say that they're silly or daft. We're going to be really understanding that they are a great solution that you have put in place for a damn good reason, because that's always the way. And then we're going to look at what you know logically. Maybe that you know people who have been successful and they've had a failure. Maybe it's you know that you could have a failure and you still actually think that your team would support you and it would be okay. And when we can connect those two things up, you can feel safer. And that avoidance behavior will just move away, loosen. So it may be that this podcast is enough, or it may be that it isn't, and you want to do some work with me. Come and book a time to chat with me, and I'll tell you whether or not I can help you. So I have a challenge for you this week. I want you to try and observe, what is your current failure avoidance strategy, if I can call it that, without judgment. What is that solution that you've put in place to ensure that failure doesn't happen? Where is it showing up? And that's all I want you to do. I just want you to notice. It's the first step, always the first step. And now I'm like, have I told them about confidence once in this episode? Because really what I've been doing this whole time is talking to you about confidence. It's very difficult to feel confident at work when this fear of failure looms large in the background. When we're overchecking, overprepping, can't do anything unless it's perfectly right. It's very difficult to feel confident, to be confident in what we know, in what we can do, when all of that is operating at the same time. And I want you, one of the good ones, feeling confident at work. All right. I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.
confident, confident, confident. I can be confident, 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 confident. I can be confident at work.